Look, I know. Okay, I know, my dear subscribers, I know what you must be thinking. Kylie, where the fuck is the Tim Burton breakdown? Listen, it is the biggest video that I have ever attempted to make. Like, I'm literally reinventing the wheel. If you follow my horror account on Instagram, then you have definitely followed the saga of me slowly losing my mind whilst in the process of making that video. So I just beg forgiveness that you must understand there are a lot of moving parts at play here. Just know that I'm scheming, I'm transpiring, plotting even to release the biggest and best video that I ever have on this channel. Now moving onward, in a rather odd turn of events, this January has been a very eventful one for horror. We have a lot to talk about in terms of TV shows like The Last of Us, Kaleidoscope, and more. Then briefly we'll have a few non-horror movies to cover, including some new releases I think, like Missing. After that I'll get into my rewatches of the month, and again, not a whole lot to cover there, but I did rewatch The Cabin in the Woods to see if I would like it the second time around. I've really been prioritizing the last two categories this past month. The first is new watches of old horror, and when I tell you I have been on an early 2000s bender. Today we'll be talking about The Mist, The Ruins, Turistas, etc. And then for our final category, there were a surprising amount of brand new horror releases this month, like Megan, Skinamarink, Sick, Infinity Pool, and if I've captivated your attention thus far, then you might be a good prospect for our cult. All you have to do to join is click the subscribe button. It does also help to click the like button, swear your allegiance in the comments section. I think you get the idea. Also, in case any dum-dums want to make things weird, the whole cult thing is a joke. As always, there will be timestamps linked down below if you just want to hop around. Let's get cracking on the TV shows that I watched, shall we? The Last of Us is up first, but seeing as I have only watched the first episode, I can't speak about it too much. I'll probably have to catch you up next month once I finish the whole thing. Basically, it's not for me, but I'm trying to watch more stuff that's out of my comfort zone. I also enjoy being able to understand some of the discourse, because I don't play video games. I've tried to in the past. I get really motion sick, and so I pretty much just stick to The Sims. But The Last of Us discourse, I mean, lately it's been a little homophobic, but in the beginning it was really cute. I could just, hit like on all the tweets that said that Bella Ramsey was the perfect casting choice. Non-binary icon. Also, Pedro Pascal is the perfect casting choice for whatever you put him in. Next up would be Kaleidoscope, which I also didn't finish. I think I've watched 2 episodes of it, and you guys, it's also just not really for me. I don't know why, because the concept of it is so interesting. If you haven't heard of this show, it's how to explain. Basically, you can watch it in any order. You just have to watch black first and white last. The colors are the names of the episodes. I'm not doing a great job right now. But Netflix randomizes the order of the episodes in between, and so everybody gets a different experience. I did look online though to see what the best viewing order was, and so I was kind of viewing it in chronological order. I don't know if it's because I did that and I didn't just do the thing where it's supposed to be random or whatever, but I'm not very interested in the show. It's about a heist, and I love heist movies. In fact, one of my favorite ones from last year was The Bad Guys, an animated one, but something about it's not connecting with me. I don't know what it is. I'm not into any of the characters. I just don't really find it very interesting. I have had friends that enjoyed it and they really liked how everything was kind of tied together by the white episode, and so I want to finish it, but also I don't. And also, with Netflix doing its whole password bullshit, I don't know if I even will be able to watch it once I leave my parents' abode. So what are you gonna do? Let's move on. I have also recently found refuge in the show Arrested Development. It's a sitcom from the early 2000s. I decided to finally get into it because I love the Smart List podcast with Sean Hayes and Jason Bateman and Will Arnett, who are in the show. Well, not Sean Hayes, but the other guys. Those 22-minute episodes are perfect for my meal breaks throughout the day. It's just such an easy, delightful watch, and I'll be laughing all by myself when I watch that show. Abbott Elementary is up next, and it's just the same. I think that season 2 is as good as, if not better than season 1. It deserves the Golden Globes and the season 3 renewal. What else can I say? Literally nothing. I have nothing. So let's move on to all the non-horror movies that I watched this month. Pineapple Express was a rewatch this month. I was just due, but I watched this with the perspective of knowing that this director would go on to make Halloween Ends. and I couldn't deal. I kept being washed over by unreality. Like, there's just no way. But yes way, this movie is not nearly as good as something like Superbad, but I think it is still endlessly rewatchable. I also watched literally every Tim Burton movie in his entire catalog, as I mentioned, for that big, thick video that's coming your way soon. But I'm really enjoying making it. That man has a wild and scandalous career, and so I'm getting into all that for that video. And like I said, I am at risk of losing my mind making it, but I'm doing it all for you. So I'm not gonna share my thoughts on any of those Tim Burton movies because all my thoughts will be in that video. AI, artificial intelligence, is up next, an unlikely collaboration between Steven Spielberg and Stanley Kubrick. A highly advanced robotic boy longs to become real so he can regain the love of his human mother. It felt like an appropriate time to watch this one because Megan just came out, and I think it was only gonna be on Amazon Prime until the 31st of January, so sorry. My dad and I also just did a live stream where we were doing a spoiler discussion of the original and remake of Child's Play, and of course the remake deals with AI. AI is a very highly rated movie with some very famous actors, Haley Joel Osment, Jude Law. Two of the biggest men in Hollywood ever, Kubrick and Spielberg, were also behind the camera. And yet, this was one of the worst movies I watched in the entire month. I cannot believe how highly it's rated. I actually feel like the entire world is conspiring to fuck with me. This movie is so bad. It's one of the weirdest things I've ever seen, and I like me some weird stuff. My dad stuck with it for the 2.5 hour runtime or whatever it was. I checked out about an hour in when the weird sex robot plotline came in. It came out of nowhere. I was super interested in the themes being presented in the beginning of the movie because it felt a lot more grounded. It just took place in this family home as they dealt with loss and this highly unique situation of kind of raising a robot child. Then it goes completely off the rails. It's uncanny. I was very uncomfortable. I didn't like it one bit. I don't know what it is I'm missing, frankly. I wish I knew. I wish I could understand. I think I even got some comments on my Letterboxd review. I don't know what to say. I don't know. The next movie I have opposite feelings towards. Tar is gonna be a big movie at the Academy Awards this year. I think it got 6 different nominations, so I knew I had to give it a go. Renowned musician Lydia Tarr is days away from the concert that will elevate her career when it seems as though nothing can go right for her. This movie is fantastic. I enjoyed almost every single minute of it. I'm so glad it was nominated for cinematography because I felt like the visual storytelling was so strong, and I personally couldn't really keep up with the dialogue. Never knew what anybody was talking about. But there is literally a 10-minute long one-shot in this movie, and I just kept leaning closer and closer to the screen with my big-ass goo-goo eyes watching it. To me, that is cinema. I find it more impressive when actors can remember their dialogue for a giant scene like that, more so than I do even with theater. I've kind of done it all. When I was a kid, I was in a ton of theater productions, and then now as an adult, I am working in film. Blocking around a camera and crew and lights and wires on the floor is so much harder than working within the bounds of a stage. Cate Blanchett also had to memorize all those lines and maintain her accent for that entire scene. And the camera movements are all so precise and gorgeous. And it's a scene that really helps you get into the mind of the character. It's kind of crucial for setting up who she is. I was blown away. I just wish that in the movie there was a little bit more composing, a little more music. I hope it wins something at the Oscars. I'm personally pulling for cinematography. But moving on, Missing would be up next from the producers of Searching. Missing is a computer found footage movie about a woman who goes missing in Colombia and her daughter's frantic search to find her. I found this movie surprisingly well written. Like, I don't actually think it could have been any better for the medium with which it's done. The story is very twisty. There's so much about the movie that I didn't see coming. Like, genuinely very compelling. I never felt bored. Also, the stylistic flares were surprisingly abundant. I mean, the cinematography, if you will, was pretty stylish. There would be these slow panning reveals of information that would then land on her reaction in the little FaceTime box. I thought it was really well done. However, all that praise being laid out, it's still a 3.5 out of 5-star movie for me. I don't think that this story specifically would have been done any better in in any other medium, like I said, because the story itself is very reliant on the computer visuals, and it just simply wouldn't have worked as a traditional film. But it's just not the most visually satisfying kind of movie, and I kind of feel a lack of connection with the characters. They have a lot of really cool tricks and things that I hadn't seen before to get you invested and help you get to know the characters, but no matter what, I just feel like there is always something kind of missing from these movies. I really like the movie Unfriended though, and Deadware from last year was pretty interesting, and you know, don't get me wrong, I would rewatch these as well. I think this medium as a whole just doesn't connect with me as much, but I would still recommend Missing. It's a really solid thriller, and it's a rare case where it might even work better watching it on your laptop at home. Anyway, I also rewatched Everything Everywhere All at Once for the third time in theaters, because why the hell not? But that will do it for all the non-horror movies that I watched, so let's move on to everything that I rewatched. TCM was the first rewatch of the month because my dad had never seen it, and so we watched it together. It's part of that live stream series that I mentioned earlier where my dad watches old classic horror movies for the first time, and then we have a spoiler discussion on my channel. The next live stream in that series will likely be Scream, so stay tuned. The Cabin in the Woods would be my next rewatch, one of the most prolific Cabin in the Woods movies for sure. I did a live stream of my top 10 cabin horror movies of all time in honor of Knock at the Cabin coming out in theaters this weekend. I wanted to take a look back on the subgenre and watch some movies from it that I had never seen before. And this was my second time watching Cabin in the Woods because I wanted to see if I would like it more this time around and see if it would crack my top 10. I just simply don't like this movie, though I do like the commentary that it's trying to make. The problem is that I don't find it scary or funny, and so I feel like the whole meta-satire element of it just doesn't work. With a movie like Scream, which I'll always reference as the best satire ever made because it's actually funny and actually makes really good commentary, but with that there was first and foremost a focus on making a good story, on making characters that you felt like you could relate to because they had seen all the same movies as you. They were just as frustrated by all the girls that run upstairs instead of running out the front door, but I hate the characters in Cabin of the Woods. Cabin of the Woods, Cabin of the Woods, Cabin in the Woods. The stoner character is a cornball. I do not claim him as a stoner icon. I know that they then try to kind of subvert that trope, but it's a little bit too late for me, all right? He's not one of us. In theory, I do like the story. I like what represents the filmmakers and what represents the audience, but the execution is just not good. That being said, I'll probably continue to rewatch this movie forever, just in the hopes that maybe someday I'll like it more because, I don't know, I'm delusional like that. And it's a movie that you can very casually throw on. I think it's a good kind of watch party movie. And also because this next movie that I want to talk about, that actually happened. I actually ended up loving it on, it was like my 4th or 5th viewing. And that would be the Child's Play remake, which I don't usually talk about the movies in my wrap up that I do for my live streams because we've already had a very in-depth discussion. But I know that not everyone watches the streams, and I just need everyone to know about this. I love this movie now, and I have a theory as to why. The first like 3 times I saw it, I really wasn't impressed. Even the last time that I rated it on Letterboxd, I only gave it 3 stars. But I think that after seeing Megan, I have a new appreciation for this movie. It's gory and brutal and sometimes funny, and it's pretty epic. It's everything that Megan could have been, and Megan copied so much more from this remake than I even remembered. But it's a 4-star movie to me now. I actually love it, and in fact, my dad thought that it was better than the original Child's Play. I know, sacrilege, but watch the replay of that stream if you want to know why. Okay, now moving on to one of the more prioritized categories of this wrap-up, and that would be my new watches of old horror. And we're gonna kick it off with The Mist, a Stephen King adaptation from 2007. The Mist follows a small community as they deal with a sudden blanket of mist that descends upon their town. The mist contains unspeakable horrors that trap a group inside of a grocery store. This movie is bonkers. I had to hop immediately onto my Patreon and do a spoiler-filled chat about that movie because I couldn't deal. I really recommend joining us over on Patreon because that was a really good in-depth kind of discussion that I had about the movie, and I can't really do that here. I don't do spoilers over here. All I can say is that I wish I had seen it sooner, but I'm really glad that I didn't watch it as a child. All anyone can talk about with that movie is the ending, and with good reason. It will knock the wind out of you and leave you feeling terrible, but it's very effective. The filmmakers were like, you know, we have this ending from Stephen King, but we want to make audiences feel so bad, and you know what? Mission accomplished. The first act of the movie is very bad, and it was to the point that I was so disappointed that I was considering turning it off. I was thinking, oh, what a goofy waste of time. Luckily, I got my head out of my ass pass and I carried on because there is some of the most effective horror that I truly have ever seen in this movie. The running theme of most of the early 2000s movies that I watched in the past month is that the body horror is very strong. In The Mist, oh boy, but we'll be talking about body horror a whole lot more later. Let's save that because The Addams Family is up next. I thought after seeing Wednesday, I should finally watch these classics and see how the casting and whatnot compared. I'll be honest, I didn't really like this movie, and trust me, no one is more devastated about that than me. But just hold your horses because I did like the sequel, okay? Just bear with me. I just don't think that 90s campiness really connects with me that much. I prefer when it's a little bit more subtle in Scream, which is a movie that's also actually scary. Or maybe I'm just making excuses because if you stack things up, I love Bride of Chucky. Arachnophobia is also super goofy. That's from 93, I think. The Addams Family was a little bit too stupid for me, a little bit too pandery to dumb kids humor. You know how I feel about stupid children's humor. I think that it's wrong to raise children to think that bottom of the barrel comedy is funny. Teach them to shoot for the stars, not reach for the low-hanging fruit, you feel me? There's a lot of that in The Addams Family, and it's to the point where I don't even think I would have liked that movie as a child. What pains me most of all is that I love Christopher Lloyd, and I really don't like him as Uncle Fester. It's too over the top, and a lot of the story is way too centric on him, and I just wanted to spend more time with the other characters. I guess I'm just a little bit spoiled after getting an entire limited series where they focus on the best character of that IP. And Christina Ricci is an amazing Wednesday who is not really given much to do here. It was a 3-star film though for her, and also because of course all the dialogue between Gomez and Morticia. Have you ever seen two actors with more chemistry? For one thing, I don't think I've ever seen two characters be more horny, and yes, that includes all the movies of the Friday the 13th franchise, because it's not just lust, it's like this deep, soul-binding love that they have for each other. They're horny for each other's love. That's truly unmatched, and I feel like Addams Family Values took everything good about the first movie and expanded upon it. This one follows Uncle Fester getting married, the kids get sent to camp, and Morticia and Gomez are really horny as ever. It's superior in every way, and I'll stand by that. Christina Ricci is given so much more to do, and her entire B-plot is about deconstructing classism and colonialism. This movie feels kind of ahead of its time with the commentary, and they also made a really dynamite casting choice. Joan Cusack as Debbie? Are you kidding me? What a riot. What a hoot. I'm so glad that this one did it for me. I was so upset that I didn't like the first one, but I felt like they really found their footing here. And also the fact that in the next movie they recast everyone, like now I don't give a shit about that. Also, if my future soulmate is watching this, you better be taking notes because I will accept nothing less than the energy that Gomez gives towards Morticia. Alright, I need some more shit. I need some cara mia, alright? But let's venture on back to the early 2000s with touristas, shall we? Travelers are enjoying a vacation along the Brazilian coast when a party at the beach proves to be a big mistake. Welcome to the first horror movie of the month that I could not finish. It has an 18% on Rotten Tomatoes. I should have listened. I can't even flat out say that it's a bad movie though, because for one thing I didn't finish it, and number two, it is definitely not made for me. I don't like realism in really brutal films. It takes away all the fun for me. I don't like watching a movie and thinking, oh god, yeah, there's a decent chance that I could actually die that way. Like, who's that fun for? I think that it's definitely a compliment to the horror of the film, but I couldn't stand it. It has a great cast though. I mean, Olivia Wilde, Melissa George, Josh Duhamel. I mean, come on. I think Melissa George is also criminally underrated. She's an early 2000s Scream queen, but not in this one. However, let's keep on this early 2000s roll and talk about The Ruins next. I also got the book recently, which I'm really excited to read. The Ruins follows a group of college students who get trapped by locals on top of an archaeological site that they should have stayed far away from. If you don't know what happens in this movie, stay away from any other synopsis and just go in blind. I promise you will be shocked. One of my favorite things about this movie is that it stars Joanna from The Hunger Games, but she's playing the complete opposite character. No, actually, my favorite thing about this movie is, wait for it, the gore. I'm becoming a gore hound. I bet you didn't see that coming. Yes, I am the girl who faints when she gets her blood drawn. I know. And yeah, I still have to look away when there is a lot of gore on screen. I can't actually watch it yet, but I really am starting to appreciate super creative gore because horror movies don't make me feel a lot viscerally anymore. And every once in a while, I want to watch something that makes me feel things. This movie, I was like, disgusting. I was feeling all types of ways, and if you like gore and and you haven't seen this movie, you're crazy. It's only streaming on HBO Max right now though, so yeah, I mean, if you're in the UK or something, then maybe that means it's on Disney Plus. Oh my god. But anyway, if you love early 2000s horror as much as I do, I think you'll find this to be a nice little hidden gem. Honeymoon is up next, watched in the spirit of Cabin in the Woods horror appreciation. Young newlyweds travel to a lakeside cottage, but shortly after arriving, things start to go awry. Whoa. Again, go in blind. I did. All I knew is that it was a Cabin in the Woods movie and it was the same director from the Fear Street trilogy. Lots of pros, lots of cons. Pro, the couple has insane chemistry and they're very likable. Con, along with that, a lot of the horrors that transpire become really repetitive because this movie is sort of overly reliant on their performances. Pro, the direction and cinematography is incredible. I can honestly see why Netflix saw that she just had this one movie and they were like, let's just give her millions of dollars. Con, the writing is not super strong in the third act. Because pro, the mystery they set up was very intriguing and had my full attention. But con, there's this really weird payoff and I wasn't fully on board with it, so the ending wasn't super satisfying. Overall, I do recommend it. I think I gave it 3.5 stars, and I want to see these actors again. I really liked them. I'm also very excited for whatever Janiak does next because she's not directing the upcoming Fear Street movies, so I'm not really sure what she's up to. In keeping with the theme, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil is up next. Finally gave this one a go. Two hillbillies are suspected of being killers by a group of paranoid college kids who just wanted to take a trip up to their family cabin. This is one of my favorite watches of the entire month, if not my favorite. I think the only other new watch that I had this month that I gave 4.5 stars was Tar, if that tells you anything. Polar opposite movies. I love how that works. I had some biases that were kind of holding me back from checking this one out because humor in the late 2000s, early 2010s was kind of reckless. There are a lot of classics from that time that I treasure, but a lot of comedians from that era thought that just being offensive was funny. Do you know the ones that I'm talking about? The ones that are like, oh, you can't even make jokes anymore. And like, no, there are a lot of people who are still actually funny. You just never actually were. And given the subject matter of this, that we follow frat boys and hillbillies, I was a bit apprehensive. Lo and behold, this movie is wholesome as fuck, and it's one of my new favorites. I now simply must find it on physical media. I think it's gonna be a rainy day movie for me. Not literally, maybe literally, but I meant like if I'm sad or something. I don't know another movie that I watched recently that had such lovable characters. I really did fall in love, and that's what made the movie for me. And the comedy was so good. I love slapstick gore. Like I said, I don't like realism with brutality, but when it's slapsticky and stupid and the CGI blood effects are bad, give that to me all day. They also stretched this really thin premise into almost the entire movie, which was so impressive. I just highly recommend if you love dark comedies, this one is one of my new favorites. Stay Alive is up next, more early 2000s. This follows a group of teenagers, question mark, they look kind of old, as they play a cursed video game that's slowly picking them off one by one. Before I watched this movie, I had no idea that Frankie Muniz invented the visor. I love spreading misinformation on the internet. In all seriousness though, yes, there are a few very recognizable faces in this movie, including the character who I think I might legally change my name to. Her name is October, played by Sophia Bush, and then Wendell Pierce also has a small role. But this movie is hot garbage. Oh my god. There were so many tech horror movies that I never saw from the early 2000s, and now I know why. I mean, it definitely has some charm as far as the time period, and there's some hilarious cliches, but it's not enough to be like, oh, it's so bad it's good. It's kind of just bad. I legitimately might name my firstborn October though, or maybe my next cat. Another early 2000s movie we have to talk about is Hatchet, a kind of a cult classic from 2006. When a group of tourists go on a haunted New Orleans swamp tour, they find themselves stranded in the wilderness, hunted by a vicious killer. I've been recommended this one a fair amount over my years on YouTube, but I just sort of put it off because I was never really feeling it. After watching it, I was definitely less than impressed. This is a cult classic though, I think because people love it for how bad it is, and there are some pretty good kills and good gore. The King Kane Hodder plays Victor Crowley, and so obviously that's a crowd favorite. Again, it just didn't have enough of that distinct early 2000s charm for me to enjoy it. I was cringing a lot more than I was laughing, and I quite honestly feel way too generous giving it 2 out of 5 stars, but it does have good kills, and I was pretty entertained by like the last 15 minutes. I'd probably never recommend this movie though, because like I said, it's really cringy, and a lot of the time it's just straight up annoying. Majority of the movie, you're following the lead, who is this very whiny man who just seems to be there to bring down the vibe for everyone else. He got broken up with and started making it everyone else's problem, you know the type. Men need to go to therapy. zombie. And the characters in general just all kind of had something to them that made them unbearable, which I guess was supposed to be kind of a self-aware comedy thing. It's annoying. A super unlikable character that I don't find annoying, that I think is just funny, is Trent from the Friday the 13th remake from 2009. He is a pleasure to hate. Whenever he's on screen, I'm having a great time. They didn't quite pull that off with Hatchet, so moving on. The last new watch of an old horror movie in January would be It Stains the Sands Red from 2016. This follows a woman through the desert as she's being pursued by a single zombie. My reasoning for checking this out was twofold. For one thing, it was the third movie I ever put on my Letterboxd watch list like 3 years ago. So it was just about damn time. I'm prioritizing my Letterboxd watch list a little bit more now. I think there's like 550 movies on it. But number two, it's also directed by Colin Minihan, who directed What Keeps You Alive. Both movies star Brittany Allen as the lead. What Keeps You Alive is phenomenal. Please don't even look it up, just go in blind. Oh wait, no, my reasoning is actually threefold because I noticed that this movie was on Tubi and on Peacock. It is on Le Coq. So I finally gave it a whirl and it was okay. It was worth watching, but I probably would never watch it again. It has a nice little blend of comedy with the horror shenanigans, but there is a pretty brutal essay scene. Not great. It's also a very unique take on a zombie movie. I think there were some developments that I definitely was not expecting. The story was therefore worth following, albeit kind of slow given the concept. It was just okay. 3 out of 5 stars. Also, if you're a big zombie movie nut, then go for it. If you like survival horror, there's some of that in there. If you like apocalypse dystopia, there's a little sprinkle of that in there as well. It's got a lot of ingredients that I think would attract a pretty broad audience. Again, not mad I saw it, but probably just never again. But now it's time to finally move on to what you've all been waiting for, all the new horror releases that I watched in January. Adult Swim Yule Log is up first. I know that this is kind of a Christmas movie and it came out last year, but the movie's only like 2 months old, so relax. This movie is impossible to explain. I don't even want to read a synopsis because I feel like you should just go in blind. What starts as a seemingly very typical holiday Yule Log screening, it turns into something much, much more. You just have to stick with it. I didn't really love it, but if you are a zany character who champions weird shit, then you might enjoy the ride this takes you on. And don't get me wrong, like I've said many a time, I'm a weird bitch myself, but this one was just kind of a little too all over the place. Some of it also definitely just went right over my head. But it's something very unique and funky fresh. I would guarantee you haven't seen anything like it before. Megan, on the other hand, would be the complete opposite. You have seen this movie before. Like I said, it's literally just the Child's Play remake, but without gore. Plus, I already did a dedicated review to this movie that was incredible, sensational, never been seen before. So go check that out, but let's move on to Sick, a new Kevin Williamson screenplay. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, 2 college students seek refuge at one of their family-owned lake cabins. This movie was kind of boring. It's a tight runtime, but it's such a conventional and pretty humorless slasher that it really didn't feel worth seeing until about the 3rd act. The reveal is kind of cool. It's like, oh, but that's it. Nothing about this movie elicited a strong reaction from me. I think it was a little bit too self-serious, especially when we know Kevin Williamson's strong suit. You've seen Scream, you've seen I Know What You Did Last Summer. The man is funny. It's not bad though. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, to be fair. Again, another one where I think it was worth watching, just not one that I'll revisit. It's a shame because I love the people that worked on it. I adore Kevin Williamson and I love Gideon Adlin. She's in one of my favorite comedies of all time, Blockers, and I thought that she was really cute in the Craft reboot, but this movie was just dry. I don't like home invasions and I don't like super self-serious slashers, and so this movie was 2 of my least favorite things. But regardless, I think that it should be a one-timer for most people. And I do get why it's a serious tone because they're dealing with COVID, which is something that we should tread lightly around, so I get that. I wouldn't change that. Just obviously didn't work for me. Snow Falls is up next, a hidden, well, not exactly a gem. After a winter storm, 5 friends are trapped in an isolated cabin with no power and they slowly succumb to a terrifying ailment. The writer thumbed through a medical journal about hypothermia while watching Cabin Fever. Yup, well said, Matthew Owens. I honestly couldn't have said it better. This is the last movie of the month that I couldn't finish, not because it wasn't for me, but because it was terrible. It's so short and somehow feels like a million years long. It's terribly shot. I'm so sorry if it was an inexperienced cinematographer working on this, but with love, the framing was not very good. I feel like composition was the first thing that we ever learned in film school because it's such an easy way to elevate your material. It costs nothing to frame something well. Just put people where they belong in the frame. For instance, in this video, look, not too much headroom, but you still give me a little space. I'm a little bit off center, sort of following the rule of thirds, but mostly because I'm keeping my images here. Granted, I don't have a great space to record in, all right? So I don't have as much depth behind me as I would like, but I try to keep the framing as interesting as I can, right? Snowfalls had other plans, like they threw the rule book away. They constantly gave their actors so much headroom, or sometimes they would cut off the top of their head, or they would be insanely underlit. I just wouldn't recommend spending any time on this one because the story is not good and also it looks really bad, so it's quite frustrating to watch. So moving on, Skinamarink is one that I also dedicated an entire review for, so go check that out. I'll link it down below. It's also on Shudder right now, literally today, so if you have Shudder, go watch that and then you can watch my review. I just have one more horror movie that I need to talk about today. Infinity Pool. Yeah, we've got a lot to talk about with this one, Senor Brendan Cronenberg. While enjoying a vacation at a resort, James and Em meet some friends who wind up being bad influences. When they venture off the resort grounds, they find themselves in deep trouble. This movie was wild. Like, when people tell you that, believe them. Also, with movies like this, sometimes it's not a matter of whether you liked it or not. It's more of a question of, what did this movie do to you? How did it make you feel? What did it leave you thinking about? It made me feel bad, thanks for asking, but it also got the cogs turning. I think that everything they wanted to accomplish with this movie was successful. Just in terms of what they want you to consider and how they want you to feel when you leave the theater. They want you to leave the theater feeling like you just got off a roller coaster, so yes, felt that. They also want you to question what having money and privilege does to the psyche, and I think they definitely accomplished that as well. This movie presents a very unique form of an unchecked privilege, and these characters really push the limits. I wish that I could say what it is, but I'm not gonna, because you should also go in blind. I'm never not gonna say that, am I? This is also the first Brandon Cronenberg movie that I've seen in full because I unfortunately just couldn't get through Possessor. I know a lot of you guys love that movie. I don't know why I was so bored by it. Obviously, I should revisit it now that it's like 3 years later and my palate has developed a lot. But anyway, I've seen a lot more from David Cronenberg, obviously The Fly, Videodrome, Crimes of the Future. People are saying now that, wow, Brandon's really developing his own voice. It's starting to really shine through. I would disagree. I feel like I'm watching a slightly more accessible David Cronenberg movie, but I don't think that's a bad thing. It's okay that they make very similar movies, and if he doesn't even want to have a different style, like, that's fine. If he actually does really want to get away from his father's influence, then that might have been perceived as an insult. I really don't mean it to be. I'm saying that I champion the work as it is, which I feel like is very similar to his father's. It's this dark, futuristic vision that feels very out of grasp and yet still kind of reasonable, if that makes sense. Like in Crimes of the Future, for example, how humans are now evolving to be able to eat plastic. That sounds off the wall, but also, does it? Brandon presents really similar themes in his movies, I think. Another similarity that I notice is that both men introduce a lot of sensuality in their films, both with the imagery and however it pertains to the themes that they're presenting. So if you're not in the mood for a very graphic and psychedelic orgy scene, this movie's not gonna be one of your better options. Both men love their sensuality and their body horror. This movie has got all of that going on. For whatever reason, I didn't picture Alexander Skarsgård ever doing a movie quite like this, even though I just saw him in The Northman, which was similarly intense, but not on the same level, obviously. I love The Northman, by the way, one of 2022's best. But he was amazing in this movie. I thought that he was so well cast. This movie also features unhinged beauty. Mia Goth has had her fair share of that recently. It's kind of becoming her brand. But even in Pearl, she was never presented as this kind of ethereal beauty. Infinity Pool is a different story. She's like a nymph or a Vila, or what am I talking about? A siren, maybe? Do you catch my drift? She's like an unhinged vixen. Rarely do we ever get to see kind of the beautiful side of this with Mia Goth, at least. She's the human embodiment of whatever the hell I'm thinking of right now. She's a beautiful thing that lures you in and then she's fucking crazy, you get my point. What I'm saying is that they finally took full advantage of Mia Goth by making her as gorgeous as she is. And they explored how that's kind of the tool that she uses to lure people in. That was exhausting, I'm sorry. Though some people have said that this was a more unhinged performance than Pearl, I am not too sure about that. They're comparable, but I don't know. She uses her natural voice more in this movie, which people say reminds reminds them of the ghost of a Victorian child. I think that adds to her kind of forbidden fruit vibe. She seems a lot more innocent. Like, you know how super poisonous frogs are always the most brightly colored, like a forbidden candy? I don't know why I keep fumbling trying to reach whatever's on the tip of my tongue. It's gonna drive me crazy. The performances of this movie are great. I do think that I prefer Mia Goth in Pearl though, as opposed to her role in this. But like I said, with this movie, I'm not sure that it's really a matter of liking it or not. I think it's much more of an experience kind of movie. I struggle to even rate it. I gave it 3.5 stars out of 5 because I had a hard time separating what just wasn't for me with what wasn't working with the movie, because it's very, very weird. Wacky even. Some people are already saying that it's gonna be the wildest horror movie of the entire year, but it's only February, so I think we can really calm down. I can also tell those people definitely haven't seen Skinamarink yet, but for the regular movie viewer that doesn't see a lot of horror or a lot of art house, I could see how Infinity Pool would break their little brains. Go see it though. Roll those dice. Support weird cinema. That's gonna do it for me today though. Isn't that something? February is going to be a wild month of content on this channel. I hope that you're excited. And maybe I'll see you at CreepyCon this weekend. Wink wink. If you want even more content from me, especially as you await these bigger videos coming to my channel, then consider joining my Patreon. We do lots of fun stuff over there. Today I'm gonna be filming a little unboxing of a big package that a patron sent. I also do all my first reactions to new horror movies. Sometimes we do spoiler chats about older movies like I mentioned with The Mist, and so much more. But these people really keep this channel funded, and so we appreciate them. Let's all say a big thank you. Give them a big round of applause. These people keep this channel going really, especially in the slower months for horror content creators such as myself. But if that's not for you, all the rest of my social media is linked down below. Go have fun, knock yourself out. Like I mentioned, if you want to follow the chronicles of me losing my mind and during the pre-production of my Tim Burton video, that's all on my horror Instagram. But I just hope that you enjoyed this video and that I catch you in the next one. Bye!